language so that we're a bit more interested in it. In a moment, we'll have PMQs Unpacked live from the House of Commons, but let's do some more Stephen Kerr on why he's not a vegetable.
I'm not a potato.
So Stephen Kerr is a Scottish MSP, stood up in Parliament yesterday to insist he is not a potato. So I've been asking for your politicians as vegetable puns. Here we go.
Baked potato, change my life.
Mike offers John Crudités, which is nice, and Tomato Tugendhans. Martin says King Edward Miliband, like that. James says Turnip Sadiq. Tom, Jacob Peasmog, these are good. Andy goes old school with Sir Alec Douglas Lagoon. Anthony says Suella Brava Mangelwurzel. I'm quite sure. What is a Mangelwurzel? Is that a vegetable? Oh, it is. It's a vegetable, isn't it? This is nice. Courgette Cooper, says someone else on Twitter. Ali says quasi-qua tangerine. We've drifted into fruits, but it's fine because we're just having a bit of fun. You can text me 87222, start messing with the word Times. Tweets using the hashtag Times Radio. But get on the YouTubes because PMQs Unpacked is next.
Across the UK, on DAB, online and on your smart speaker. This is Times Radio.
It's 12 o'clock. This is Times Radio. I'm Matt Chorley. In a moment, PMQs Unpacked, live from the House of Commons. Tim Shipman from the Sunday Times is here. First, a quick look at the headlines this lunchtime. Facebook's owners have announced its plans to cut global workforce by 13%. By letting more than 11,000 employees go. The Meta boss, Mark Zuckerberg, says it's because the surge in online commerce during COVID hasn't turned out to be permanent. He's told staff he takes accountability and apologised to those affected. Elsewhere, a man's been detained by police after appealing to throw eggs at the King and Queen consort in York. Charles and Camilla were in the city to unveil a statue of the late Queen at the Minster as part of their tour of Yorkshire. It's expected nurses will announce widespread strike action this afternoon. For the first time in the Royal College of Nursing's 106-year history, the members across the UK will walk out over pay. And Pakistan have eased to a 7-wicket victory over New Zealand to seal their place in cricket's T20 World Cup final. They restricted their opponents to 152 for 4 in Sydney before passing their target with 5 balls to spare. Pakistan will face the winner of tomorrow's other semi, which is between England and India for the trophy on Sunday morning. We'll have a full news and sport roundup at 12:30. But now on Times Radio and the Times Radio YouTube channel, it's time for this.
PMQs Unpacked on Times Radio. Unpacking the politics and cutting through the crossfire.
Order, order. I call Matt Chorley and Tim Shipman.
Yes, and he's here, the Sunday Times chief political commentator, Tim Shipman. It's the first one we've done with Rishi.
One or other of us has been off prior to this.
Yes.
So Sunak had a good start, didn't he? Batted Starmer a little bit around the park the first week. Last week, not so much.
Not so much. Kirsten
and used quite a lot of the same lines, and I think Tory MPs will be, hoping that Michael Gove's written him some new jokes, I would have thought. But,
Well, this is it. I mean, he's basically got the stand-ups problem. That if you're doing one gig as Chancellor, you do 1 or 2 gigs, maybe a month, big
Chancellors
gigs a year.
Osborne was the same, and Brown, they'd emerge when they wanted to and look good and then disappear.
But he's basically, Rishi Sunak is like a stand-up who's just got a break on, he's now on Mock the Week every week. Yeah, he needs a lot of new material.
He's doing a residency
He's
now,
got a residency. Once you're on the telly, you need new material all the time.
Yeah.
Gavin Williamson, how significant is the resignation?
I don't think it. I mean, look, in the greater scheme of things, it's not as exciting as the Labour Party would like us all to believe, but it points to a really big issue about Rishi Sunak. If you look at the polls, if you talk to his colleagues, everybody says this is a serious bloke with a good, high-developed mind who is, on the face of it, a decent, competent politician. But the big question mark about him has been his political judgment. The spring statement didn't go well for him. He screwed up on his wife's non-dom status because he didn't see the problem with it. And now various people warned him. A lot of people were phoning me up and saying there were various people he shouldn't appoint to jobs, and Gavin Williamson is one of them. Ben Wallace, the Defence Secretary, went on the record to say that. These guys have been stirring up trouble. They're a menace. Don't give a job to him. Now, lots of leaders, in fact, every Tory leader has found Gavin Williamson a useful chap to have around, which is why they have all given him jobs, and every last one of them has found that they've had to let him go as well, because the way he behaves is a little bit on the edge for a lot of people.
Just try to explain to people who might be wondering, what is it that Rishi Sunak thought Gavin Williamson was bringing to the party? Or is it just him being inside government was better than him being outside causing trouble?
Well, that's one of the observations. I mean, he's a guy who understands his colleagues, and frankly, politics is a dirty trade, and Gavin Williamson is someone who's prepared to get his hands dirty. And a lot of the stuff that's coming to light about what you might call classic whipping behaviour, slightly threatening, slightly overbearing kind of behaviour, which was very common once and is now much less common in the world of Me Too and all the rest of it. People don't like bullies anymore. They might have tolerated them, in politics for a long time, and the perception is that Williamson not only practices the dark arts, but revels in them. I mean, one of the strangest speeches I've ever heard at a party conference was when he introduced Theresa May. It got lost because Theresa May had her dreadful coughing fit and everything, everything fell off the wall behind her. But the speech that introduced her was Gavin Williamson as Chief Whip. Chief Whips don't give speeches at party conference, but he demanded the right to do so and did. And he made this very strange speech about sticks and carrots and saying, well, I'm not that much of an advocate of the stick, but it's amazing what you can do with a sharpened carrot. And, that sums up Gavin Williamson. He was always looking for a weapon. He had his tarantula. He had his bullwhip on the desk. We hear he, got a samurai sword and used to flail around the office with it. This is for a once fireplace salesman, this is a guy who has advanced,
quite a long way
in politics, and not always through the power of his mind, oratory, or ministerial skills.
So it's likely to come up, I think it's fair to say, at PMQs
today. Likely to come up is one of those. One
thing you should probably know, and this is the advantage of PMQs Unpacked, he is the MP for South Staffordshire. So just in case there are references to the MP for South Staffordshire, they're talking about Gavin Williamson. So it's Tim Shipman who's here with me for PMQs Unpacked. We pause the action live from the House of Commons. You can listen along on Times Radio or watch along on the YouTube channel. Where are you all watching today? Hi from Taunton. There's always Stephen in Taunton. Hello from Cambridge. Hi from Utrecht, Bedford, Dubai. It's all happening. Get online to the YouTube channel. Tweet it, share it, tell your friends. Subscribe. There we are. Right, go. Let's kick things off then. We'll go live to the House of Commons. This is question number 1 from Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I join the Prime Minister in his comments about Remembrance Day? We remember all those who paid the ultimate price and all those who have served and are serving our country. Mr. Speaker, the member for South Staffordshire told a civil servant to slit their throat.
That is Gavin Williamson.
How does the Prime Minister think the victim of that bullying felt when he expressed great sadness at his resignation?
Mr. Speaker, unequivocally, the behaviour complained of was unacceptable, and it is absolutely right. It is absolutely right that the Right Honourable Gentleman has resigned. For the record, I did not know about any of the specific concerns relating to his conduct as Secretary of State or Chief Whip, which date back some years. I believe that people in public life should treat others with consideration and respect, and those are the principles that this government will stand by.
Well, there's quite a lot there. So we should explain that in the exchange of letters last night, Gavin Williamson wrote to the Prime Minister to resign. In response, Rishi Sunak wrote back saying, "Thank you for your resignation later. It is with great sadness that I accept your resignation." So that's what Keir Starmer was
well,
getting
it is
at.
Probably with great sadness that the Prime Minister's lack of political judgment has been exposed quite so quickly in his premiership. So I suspect that's sincere at one level. The key word there, though, Matthew, was...
I know what you're going to say. I've circled it.
Specific concerns.
I was not aware of any specific concerns.
Yeah, and he didn't know about this behaviour. Well, I mean, frankly, he could have phoned any journalist and we'd have told him about not necessarily the stuff that's emerged, but, there are...
But also,
this
that's
stuff has
why
been doing the rounds for a long time.
It's not like he was brought in because he was a particularly brilliant transport secretary, and that's why he was brought in. He was Minister without portfolio. He was brought in precisely because of the behaviour that's been revealed.
I mean, one of the great revelations, of course, of yesterday was that he did actually, by the end, have a portfolio, and we now no longer have a minister for the Geospatial Commission.
Wow, quite.
Which is
Well, somebody did
It's a big
message
day
in.
in politics.
Cameron says, all very well joshing, Matt, but the big question is who's going to do all Gavin Williamson's work now? So who's in charge of the Geospatial Commission?
Well, as somebody in number 10 put it to me last night, that sounds like ripe for privatisation. So we may not need a minister at all. But no, you're right. I mean, general concerns about Gavin Williamson's behaviour have been around for a long time. I mean, those of you who have a subscription to the Times and the Sunday Times should have a look at a piece that his former special advisor wrote for the Sunday Times a few years ago, which had all the samurai sword stuff in it and some slightly curious behaviour. We think, the most famous photo op with him was him sitting there with those sort of killer dogs from the army that he was saving, who everyone says, probably ought to have been put down. But this was a Williamson sort of, so his time in government was either characterised by oddness and weirdness, or when he was Education Secretary by, I think most people think incompetence, and his time as Chief Whip and in lots of other roles behind the scenes as sort of mildly sinister dark arts. So, for Rishi Sunak to say he knew nothing specific, I mean, perhaps that's accurate and fair enough, but the idea that he didn't know the gist of what most of his colleagues would say about Gavin Williamson is a complete bunkum.
Well, let's see, because we've basically had the opening salvo. Keir Starmer's first question. Rishi Sunak reads his very carefully worded response. Can he get through another 5 questions?
He's not going to be able to read that 5 times more.
Read that 5 times more. So let's go back there. This is question number 2 from Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, the member for South Staffordshire spent years courting the idea he can intimidate others, blurring the lines to normalise bullying behaviour. It's precisely why the Prime Minister gave him a job. The truth is simple. He's a pathetic bully. But he would never get away with it if people like the Prime Minister didn't hand him power. So does he regret his decision to make him a government minister?
Mr. Speaker, I obviously regret appointing someone who has had to resign in these circumstances. But I think what the British people would like to know is that when situations like this arise, that they will be dealt with properly. And that's why it is absolutely right that he resigned, and it's why it is absolutely right that there is an investigation to look into these matters properly. I said my government would be characterised by integrity, professionalism and accountability, and it will.
Well, it takes some. I mean, it's certainly bold returning to your themes of integrity and professionalism, given that he's spent his first 2 weeks of PMQs defending the Home Secretary, who's sitting next to him today, actually, Suella Braverman. She's in shot. And the integrity and professionalism at the Home Office. And now he's trying to defend the integrity and professionalism of giving Gavin Williamson a job.
Yeah, I mean, it's a sort of... it's a bravura effort to hold the line, you'd say, and a slight hint that, well, at least we got rid of him, quickly, unlike that Boris Johnson fellow. Do you remember him? That's sort of what he's hinting at. It wasn't that quick. We had several revelations.
And some people will be wondering, why does he resign and not get the sack?
Yeah. Because it looks better and you're less likely to antagonise Gavin Williamson, would seem to be what Rishi Sunak and his aides are thinking of. And for that reason, he's been, allowed to go and has got a nice letter in return. Yeah. But yes, there certainly will be some people who would prefer him to have been summarily fired. But in a sense, I think people think that to do that would be more of an acknowledgement that he shouldn't have been appointed in the first place.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. Do you regret giving him a job? I obviously regret appointing someone who has had to resign in these circumstances. Again, quite carefully pick your way through that one. Let's see if Keir Starmer's going to pursue this line, or he might well broaden it out or go on to another topic. There we go. There's question number 3 from Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, everyone in the country knows someone like the member for South Staffordshire.
Gavin Williamson.
A sad middle manager getting off on intimidating those beneath him. But everyone in the country also knows someone like the Prime Minister. The boss who is so weak, so worried the bullies will turn on him, that he hides behind them. What message does he think it sends when, rather than take on the bullies, he lines up alongside them and thanks them for their loyalty?
Quite strong stuff from Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, the message that I clearly want to send is that integrity in public life matters. And that is why That is why it is right that the right honourable member has resigned. It is why it is right that there is a rigorous process to examine these issues. But as well as focusing on this one individual, it is also right and important that we keep delivering for the whole country. And that's why this government will continue to concentrate on stabilising the economy, on strengthening the NHS, and on tackling illegal migration. Those are my priorities. Those are the priorities of the British people, and this government will deliver on them.
Those are my priorities, and those are things that we weren't actually talking about, but it's got him through another question.
It's called the pivot.
Although you're supposed to do it slightly more elegantly than that, aren't you?
Meanwhile...
Quite strong stuff.
Yeah, Starmer's not mucking
He's
about.
He's not mucking about today.
No. And interestingly, they've got, Sunak is well known by the public for, what he did during the pandemic, but he's still a relatively new character, and Labour wants to sort of frame him in the public mind and trying to sort of use that imagery of, the sort of slightly weak chap hiding behind the bullies, and whisper it quietly is the fact that Sunak is a bit of a diddy fellow.
Quite a short chap.
Yeah, it's kind of, you can see how that might cut through.
If you were a cartoonist, it wouldn't take much to portray him as the sort of the little guy hanging back behind the bullies.
No, I mean, Frankie Boyle had a joke last week, didn't he, about how Sunak can't give a speech at night because he might be seized by owls, which is, again, plays on the idea that he's such a small fella that he might just sort of be plucked and flown away.
And yet he still can't find any trousers that fit.
No, indeed. They don't reach his shoes in the way that yours and mine do.
But like a sad middle manager getting off on intimidating people beneath, that's quite, for Keir Starmer...
It's quite punchy.
Yeah, they've sharpened... There's definitely an attempt by Labour to sharpen things up.
Yeah, and they've got an opportunity here. They've got a new target. In a sense, the Liz Truss moment was a bit of an anticlimax for Labour. They didn't really need to do anything. They just
watched it all unfold.
Watched it all collapse. And now they've got to, they think Sunak will be around longer. They think he's probably the guy they're going to fight at the general election, and they're trying to frame him in the public mind.
And actually, the thing that because of what happened in 2019, the Conservatives, Boris Johnson's got to define himself pretty quickly. Before Labour, because they were sorting themselves out and picking a leader. So, defining your enemy early on rather than letting them do it themselves is quite important. Let's go back then. This is, we go back to the House of Commons. Question 4 from Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, the problem is he can't stand up to a run-of-the-mill bully. So he has no chance of standing up to vested interests on behalf of working people. Take Shell. They made record profits this year, £26 billion. How much have they paid under his so-called windfall tax?
That's quite a pivot as well.
Mr. Speaker, I was Chancellor who introduced an extra tax on the oil and gas companies. Right, but he talks, Mr. Speaker, he talks about working people. The Right Honourable Member voted against legislation to stop strikes disrupting working people. He voted against legislation to stop extremist protesters disrupting working people. That's because he's not on the side of working people, Mr. Speaker. That's what the Conservatives are for.
So many pirouettes now. It's like Torval and Dean now, isn't it? So, Starmer, I will pivot.
I'm going to pivot from bullying to Shell.
Yeah.
And then Rishi Sunak, will pivot from that to... interesting, he won't even use the word windfall tax. When he announced it earlier in the year, it was called something else, wasn't it? An additional profits dividend levy or something.
It was at least prepared to lean sort of gently into it there, in a way that Liz Truss never was. Starmer spent weeks attacking her for not introducing a windfall tax, and she never once mentioned, well, we've already introduced
got one.
But yes, I mean, the interesting thing there, Sunak on strikes and protesters, the Tories feel that's a bit of an Achilles heel for Labour, and that people are getting a bit bored of the M25 being closed down by these oil people and a lot of the disruption to transport and all the rest of it. And they think that's a productive line of inquiry, and making it difficult for, Labour is always reluctant to sort of go after people like that. And they think that, that's how, if there's any chance of Rishi Sunak connecting with the red wall voter, it's that sort of stuff that they think that they need to make a big thing of. It's
quite a weird thing, that, though, isn't it? It goes back to the argument we've talked a lot about. You've been in government for 12 years. Is it Keir Starmer's fault that the trains aren't running, or your post isn't being delivered, or the M25 is blocked?
Well, that would be a good response by Keir Starmer in Prime Minister's Question Time if he had the job.
Yes.
Who knows? He may even mention that in his the top of his next
Well,
question.
frankly, there's no way of knowing where they're going to go next.
No.
Let's find out.
Literally ice dancing.
Could be, let's pivot away. This is, we're bringing you PMQs Unpacked here on Times Radio. You can watch along on the YouTube channel, on Times Radio YouTube channel. Let's go back to the House of Commons, and this is question number 5 from Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, I'm against all of those causing chaos, damage to our public services and to our economy, whether they are gluing themselves to the road or sitting on the government benches. Mr. Speaker, there was no answer to the question because the answer is nothing. Shell haven't paid a penny in windfall tax. Why? Because for every pound they spend digging for fossil fuels, he hands them a 90p tax break, and it's costing the taxpayer billions. So will he find a backbone and end his absurd oil and gas giveaway?
Well, Mr. Speaker, what the party opposite will never understand is that it's businesses investing that create jobs in this country. Mr. Speaker, we on this side of the House, we understand that. We will support businesses to invest, to create jobs, because that's how we create prosperity, that's how we support strong public services, and that's what you get with a Conservative government.
Well, that was a good philosophical contest, that one, actually.
And
good response from Starmer, wasn't it?
Good response from Starmer. Sort of going to the point that we were making. He just needs to shut down the idea that he's on the side of people gluing themselves to things.
Yeah, no, and he did that. And then Simon against anyone who's causing chaos, including the government themselves.
Yeah.
I thought that deserved a bit more of a laugh than it got from his own side, to be honest. But then, and the Shell point is an interesting one. And I think the daily papers, you can imagine, will do something with that. It's the kind of thing that riles a lot of Middle England if they're not paying any windfall tax. But then Sunak still getting a decent level of noise from his own side in stating Tory philosophy, which is that, you encourage businesses to invest, it creates jobs, and that's how the world goes round. So this has been quite a good meaty exchange all in so far, I'd say.
Although the thing about Rishi Sunak putting himself on the side of business, we understand business invest, they create jobs. That's really not where the public are. There aren't that many. You have to be pretty purist, almost borderline Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng, to think that the number one priority right now is keeping business happy.
True, but jobs are important, and that's the one bit of the economy that's been working for the last few years. And I think there aren't voters in any corner of the land that don't think jobs are important. So it keeps them in play, even if it's not the sort of populist argument that you might have heard from some other Tory leaders. And also, I suppose, Rishi Sunak's still new in the job, keeping his backbenchers happy, the broad coalition he's trying to hold together. That's what I was also the other point I would have made. I think it's, he had a dicey week last week. They've had some problems this week. Williamson's embarrassing. Frankly, the best result for Sunak really is not to be, as long as he's not pummeled by Starmer, and as long as Tory MPs walk out of that chamber thinking, well, actually did an okay job there, that's probably job done. That's probably as good as it gets. Yeah. Well, here we are then, the peroration, as we like to say. As both of them reach for what could possibly be at the very least, a social media clip, if not a clip for the news. Let's go back then to the House of Commons. This is question number 6 from Keir Starmer.
There's only one party that crashed the economy, and they're all sitting there. It's a pattern, Mr. Speaker, it's a pattern with this Prime Minister. Too weak to sack the security threat sat around the cabinet table. Too weak to take part in a leadership contest after he lost the first one. Too weak to stand up for working people. He spent weeks flirting with the climate change deniers in his party, then scuttled off to COP at the last minute. In the budget next week, he'll be too weak to end his oil and gas giveaway, scrap the non-dom tax breaks, and end the farce of taxpayers subsidising private schools. That's what Labour would do, a proper plan for working people. Yes. Mr. Speaker, if he can't even stand up to a cartoon bully with a pet spider, if he's too scared to face the public in an election, what chance has he got of running the country?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker.
We want to try and get through on time, and I know some members want to catch my eye. They're not doing a good job so far. Come on, Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the honourable gentleman talks about judgment about putting people around the cabinet table. I would just gently remind him he thought the member for Islington North was the right person to look after our security. But, Mr. Speaker, the honourable gentleman, he said a lot today. He said a lot today, but it's clear that he isn't focused on the serious issues that are confronting our country. We're strengthening our economy. He's backing the strikers. We're supporting people with energy bills. He's supporting the protesters. And we're tackling illegal migration. He's opposing every measure. The British people want real leadership on the serious global challenges we face, and that's what they'll get from this government.
Oh, Suella Braverman was enjoying that, nodding along and smiling, sitting next on one side of the Prime Minister, Dominic Raab, the Deputy Prime Minister, sitting on the other side. Keir Starmer, 2 week. They've obviously decided this is the thing they want to go after Rishi Sunak.
He looks a bit small. He's 2 weak. He can't stand up to a, what was it, a Commonwealth Garden bully with a pet spider? Which,
a security risk around the cabinet table, which I assume was that was a reference to Suella Braverman.
Well, and it could have been once a reference to Gavin Williamson as well,
exactly
who was fired for leaking from the National Security Council. And yeah, rousing screams of more from the Labour benches. They like that a lot, nearly as much as the wag who yelled "Bring back the lettuce," which was the best heckle I've heard at PMQs for quite some time.
Quite a while. There's one of the downsides to us doing it in the studio. You don't pick up. You need them to be picked up by the microphones. But if you are in the gallery, you sometimes hear the sort of slightly off stage heckle. But that 2 week. I mean, it's not an accident. Keir Starmer trying to emulate, I think, Tony Blair when he went up against John Major.
Isn't it extraordinary that the Prime Minister of our country can't even urge his party to support his own position? Yeah. Weak.
And, but he's 2 week.
Yeah, I mean, if they can make it stick, there's the next general election in the bag, and they've clearly thought that that's a good way to attack Sunak, who has got, he's got a lot of problems. He's not in a position of great strength with his own party, and they've made a couple of unforced errors already. Then the Sunak response, which I think will be indicative of what you're going to see in the run-up to the next general election. You're going to see this budget, which is going to be about trying to direct money to the most in need, but then the tough side of the Tory message is going to be on protesters, strikes, immigration, wokery, all that kind of stuff. So you'll get a kind of, it's a bit back to what Boris Johnson tried, a bit of handouts on the financial side, coupled with sort of hardline sort of cultural...
Bash the protesters.
Yeah, exactly, on the other side. Sunak also tried, he rolled out the Corbyn line again. Which is a legitimate line, let's not be wrong about it, but in terms of it feeling like something that's getting any traction in the chamber at all, or indeed particularly outside it, that just feels like old hat to a lot of people, I think.
Well, you've taken the words right out of Susan on the YouTube channel, says it's so old hat. Somebody else says Corbyn bingo, Benjamin. Yeah, it's to just keep bringing it up, but that's your best argument as to what, and it's a legitimate point that Keir Starmer thought, at least pretended he thought Jeremy Corbyn should be Prime Minister, but it's what's happening right now is important.
And it also doesn't sort of work because everybody knew Keir Starmer didn't really want Jeremy Corbyn to be Prime Minister.
He's kicked him out of the party.
But as I said earlier, I think, Sunak made a fist of it and he still had some noise. It wasn't like the silent echoing horror behind him that you sometimes get when a leader's in trouble. Yeah. I think most Tory MPs would have thought he gave a decent account of himself, and Starmer clearly won that hands down. But Sunak still scored a few runs, and that's important.
And interesting though, he says we're never mind all that trivial nonsense. We're focusing on the big issues: the economy, the NHS, illegal immigration. None of those things are going terribly well.
No, they're not.
And it's fine because you can say, well, I've only been here for a couple of weeks. But come the next election, it's not totally clear that the economy, the NHS and illegal immigration is going to be any better.
No, they will try to show... the only hope the Tories have got is to show movement in all three of those and say, let us finish the job.
Yeah.
That's clearly what the Tory election campaign is going to look like. We're going in the right direction. Don't risk it. Won't risk a change of leader. But as you say, it's not immediately obvious that any of those can be fixed. The economy ought to be in a better position. Most people think inflation will have started to come down next year, and unless they really make a mess of things in 9 days' time, that ought to be clawing back, but not to the point where people are beginning to feel like things are going well or that they've got more money in their pocket. The NHS is a problem post-COVID that would defy any government, and immigration, as we have seen, has been consistently much higher than the public seems to want it to be for 2 decades now.
Yeah.
If Rishi Sunak can solve that in 2 years flat, maybe he does deserve to remain in Downing Street. But as you say, it's not exactly obvious that that's going to be the case.
Yeah, absolutely. And it'd be interesting. Yeah, as time, this time next week we're on the eve of that autumn statement. And then the week after, the fallout of that is we're going to define definitely politics all the way up to Christmas and possibly even beyond. Tim Shipman, stay where you are because we'll do the best of the West in just a minute, which basically means we're going to hear a lot of Ian Blackford. It's Matt Chorley bringing you PMQs Unpacked right here on Times Radio. Stay tuned on the Times Radio YouTube channel because you'll be able to see Tim and I scrolling through our phones while we get the very latest news from Eleanor Sherwood.
Jane Garvey and Fee Glover this afternoon from 3 on Times Radio.
It's Wellness Wednesday. The gong will ring for Rosamund Dean and she's going to talk about sleep and how to get it.
How is your sleep at the moment?
It's all right, actually.
Are you kept awake by the demons?
No.
Florence Given is our big guest.
And some people say she's the voice of Gen Z.
I'm going to have a sleepless night, familiarising myself with all of the traits of Gen Z. You're across them, aren't you?
I live with them, yes. And Katie Prescott will talk tech.
Jane Garvey and Fee Glover this afternoon from 3 on Times Radio. Across the UK, on DAB, online and on your smart speaker. This is Times Radio.
Matt, thank you. Good afternoon. The Prime Minister is insisting he didn't know about any specific concerns relating to Sir Gavin Williamson's behaviour when he appointed him. Last night, the Cabinet Minister resigned, saying formal investigations into bullying claims against him were becoming a distraction. Rishi Sunak's been facing Sir Keir Starmer at Prime Minister's questions. The PM told the Commons he obviously regrets appointing Sir Gavin to his cabinet.
Unequivocally, the behaviour complained of was unacceptable. And it is absolutely right. It is absolutely right that the right honourable gentleman has resigned. For the record, I did not know about any of the specific concerns relating to his conduct as Secretary of State or Chief Whip, which date back some years.
Facebook's parent company Meta says it will be letting go more than 11,000 employees in one of the biggest tech layoffs this year. The job cuts are being blamed on soaring costs and a weak advertising market. An officer with Essex Police has been injured while dealing with climate protesters on the M25. Their motorbike was hit during a crash involving 2 lorries between junctions 26 and 27, where a demonstration was being carried out. It's expected nurses will announce widespread strike action this afternoon. It will be the first time in the Royal College of Nursing's 106-year history that members across the UK will walk out to overpay. And a man has been detained by police after throwing eggs towards the King and Queen consort during a walkabout in York. The royals were not hit as they walked along the city's Micklegate bar. In the weather, any heavy showers from this morning will die out as we head into the afternoon, making way for sunny spells. Temperatures will be mild. Toby Gillis has your sport.
The Times understands the owners of England's most successful football club, Liverpool, are prepared to sell the club for more than £3 billion. US banking sources have confirmed a sales brochure has been circulated around potentially interested parties, many of whom were interested in buying Chelsea when they were available earlier in the year. Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley are assisting FSG in the process. Neither, though, have commented. Times chief sports correspondent Matt Lawton says no global economic crisis will weaken interest in such a sporting institution.
We've just had Elon Musk spend billions on Twitter. The super rich seem to be immune, as you say, to this kind of thing. So, there are a lot of bidders for Chelsea. Certainly the way we're being guided at the moment is that it's most likely that the serious bids that are entertained will come from America. Obviously, the dollar is strong right now compared to the pound. The wealth is there.
One of the players expected to be a key in the England team during the upcoming World Cup is understood to have been told he's failed in his race against time to be selected. Chelsea right-back Reece James has been struggling with a knee injury since early last month, but was said to be ahead of schedule in his recovery. Manager Gareth Southgate, though, called him last night to say he wouldn't take the risk. So James, who was thought to be in the manager's first 11 plans, won't go to Qatar. England have a crisis at fullback with another right-sided player, Kyle Walker, and left-back Ben Chilwell, both also injured. And the England one-day cricket captain Jos Buttler remains hopeful that two key players will be fit for tomorrow's 2020 World Cup semi-final with India. Bowler Mark Wood, the fastest in the whole tournament on average, and batter David Malan are both injury doubts. Butler's given this update on the eve of the tournament.
We'll try and give them as long as possible. Obviously David left the field the other day with a small niggle. Woody's had a bit of stiffness. We'll trust the medical team. We trust those two guys as well, and we'll give them as long as possible.
You can read more on these stories on the Times website or app.
Times Radio Sports Headlines with Currys. Buy any LG TV over £649 for a
with MasterCard's Strive UK programme, connecting small business owners with the right tools and support to help them thrive in the digital economy. Find out more at mastercard.co.uk/strive.
A very good afternoon to you. It's Matt Chorley. We've just been doing PMQs Unpacked, pausing the action live from the House of Commons between Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak. You can still watch along live on the Times Radio YouTube channel. Tim Shipman, chief political commentator of the Sunday Times, is here as well. So now it's the best of the rest. And as a special treat for you, apparently we're going to bring you a double dose of the SNP's Ian Blackford.
Not only do we have a UK government that denies democracy, we now have a Secretary of State that is running scared from it. In the middle of a Tory cost of living crisis, the Scotland office is now to be led by a baron-in-waiting, biding his time until he can cash in on the 300-day job for life in the House of Lords. He should be sacked from the Cabinet, and the people of Dumfries and Galloway should be given the chance to sack the Tories in a by-election. The Prime Minister's judgment is already in tatters. If he has any integrity left, will he now put a stop to these two predecessors stuffing the House of Lords with his cronies?
Mr. Speaker, what the Secretary of State and I are jointly focused on is working constructively with the Scottish Government to deliver for the people of Scotland. I'll be pleased to be meeting the First Minister tomorrow because that, I think, is what the people of Scotland want to see.
Mr. Speaker.
Oh, there we are. That's
criminal gangs who operate.
That was Ian Blackford, the SNP leader.
Promised people a double dose.
We did promise it. We only had the second dose, I think.
Yeah.
This is the honours. It's quite a story, this, isn't it? Boris Johnson.
It is, and actually, ironically,
Bunging
the
a
one
couple
that
of people
Ian
into
Blackford has focused on is one of the less egregious. You know, Alistair Jack's been a cabinet minister for years. What's weird about it is that he gets to defer his period.
Yeah. The reason why he's going on that is because Alistair Jack is the Conservative Scottish secretary.
Exactly.
And he's been offered a route out of the Commons as and when the time comes.
Yes,
based
whenever
on
you'd
current
like it, old
polls.
chap, you shuffle up to the red benches.
He might not be there for very much longer. But can Rishi Sunak do anything about this? There was obviously a leaked list that Lara Spear had in the Times yesterday.
I don't think the Prime Minister can do a great deal about it. I think resignation honours lists are very much more difficult to interrupt and prevent than normal ones. The House of Lords Appointments Commission will look at them and check that there are not people who are not fit and proper members of the House of Lords. But some of the more controversial ones are not sort of people who've necessarily done anything particularly egregious in public life, but they're people who are astonishingly young and whose claim to fame is that they were basically loyal to Boris Johnson.
Yeah.
A chap called Ross Kempsall, former journalist.
Being Boris Johnson's press officer is not necessarily qualification enough.
No, and actually, if you go back, the last two directors of communications in Downing Streets to get gongs, Robbie Gibb and Craig Oliver, both got knighthoods.
Yeah.
And that was regarded as relatively sort of unusual and slightly controversial.
Well, amusingly, of course, Theresa May said she retched.
She did. She was very upset about
Craig Oliver get one, and then gave Robbie Gibb one.
Gave one to Robbie Gibb, who I think most people would agree was less effective than Craig Oliver in the job. So that is a curiosity. But to get a peerage at the age of 30,
yeah.
And, another one has been given to a young lady called Charlotte Owen, who has worked for both Boris Johnson and Liz Truss in quite junior jobs. And I think that's a degree of what can only be described as total consternation about the fact she only graduated in 2015, and yet she's off to the upper house.
Yeah.
Now, it may be that the House of Lords Appointments Commission taps Boris Johnson on the shoulder and says, I'm not sure about this.
Yeah, and a couple of them drop off.
And a couple of them might drop off. But at the moment, it's certainly a very rum state of affairs.
I mean, not least as well, because he was literally forced from office. It's, it wasn't that he resigned, after losing a general election and gets given, although as you start getting to the realms of what is the weather of time for bunging your mates in the House of Lords. Anyway, let's go back to the House of Commons now. I think we're going to hear from the former Labour Cabinet Minister, Ben Bradshaw. Yeah, this is Ben Bradshaw in the House of Commons.
5 years ago, the government belatedly launched a review into the security risk posed by handing thousands of mainly wealthy Russian and Chinese nationals so-called golden visas so they could live in Britain. It also promised to publish the results of that review. Why hasn't it?
Well, Mr. Speaker, we did indeed review and indeed end the visa that the honourable gentleman is raising. The Home Office is currently conducting the right way to replace that visa with something that is more sustainable going forward and protects our security interests. I'll be happy to have the Home Secretary write to him with an update on that process.
But explain that story, Tim. It was a long time ago that this was a big thing.
It was a long time ago. I mean, in the interests of getting money into Britain, a lot of people were given, had the red carpet rolled out for them. But of course, since then, we've now had endless controversies about Russian and Chinese oligarchs. Where did their money come from, and who have they been giving it to? And do they remain? A lot of them have come, saying that they're sort of dissidents who've fallen out with the regime, and in some cases, there's evidence that they're people who are almost acting as sort of agents of influence for the governments they left. It's there was a crackdown on all this. Letters will be written. Ben Bradshaw got it was at least Sunak engaged with the substance of it, but reasons were not provided as to why it hasn't been published. I can give you the reason now. It's too blooming embarrassing.
At what point, though, if it's 5 years ago, could they not publish it and then Rishi Sunak was nothing to do with me, but in the interest of transparency and integrity and professionalism?
Well, let's see.
Yeah, that's.
But one imagines if he knew about the question and wanted to take the sting from it, that's precisely what he would have said, announced. I suspect some of them have given money to the Conservative Party since. So,
well, we'll see. We'll see how that pans out. Tim, lovely to see you. Thank you for coming in. What are your expectations for next week? How bad is the autumn statement going to be?
Well, it depends which end of the income scale you're at. Someone who's paid quite as much money as you are, Matthew, is going to have their pip squeak, I suspect.
Well, everyone paid a lot less than you, Tim. Tim Shipman, Chief Political... Turn his microphone off. Chief Political Commentator, thanks very much for coming in and doing PMQs Unpacked for us. We'll do the same thing, same time next week. And we'll bring you... Or there might not be one. Might be recess. I think we are on recess next week, apparently. But we'll be back for the autumn statement. We will, up next, we're going to check in on the rocket taking off from Cornwall. And we'll do the quiz as well. And we'll do a few more of your politicians as vegetables because they're particularly good. It's Matt Chorley on Times Radio in association with MasterCard Strive's UK programme. Find out more at mastercard.co.uk/Strive.
Early breakfast on Times Radio. Every weekday morning from 5, join Anna Cunningham for a fresh take on all the stories making the morning headlines.
I'll be reviewing the front pages you're waking up to and making sure you start the day well informed.
Plus, keep ahead of all the markets with updates, analysis and insight with Times Radio's daily dedicated business bulletin. Early breakfast on Times Radio with Nutmeg, the digital wealth manager. Step into the glow. As with all investing, your capital is at risk.
Some people think the metaverse will only be virtual. But did you know that surgeons will be able to practice complex operations virtually before treating patients in real hospitals? And using virtual reality, school students will travel back in time to deepen their understanding of history firsthand. The metaverse may be virtual, but the impact will be real. Learn how Meta is helping to build the metaverse at meta.com/metaverseimpact/EN.
Imagine an adults-only getaway, being spoiled at a country manor, or refreshed by a heritage coastline. Enjoying some precious you time, with tasty dishes and cocktails, and live music and shows. Why just imagine when you can have it all with Warner Hotels. Book your 2023 break today at warnerhotels.co.uk. So much included in the price.
Across the UK, on DAB digital radio, on the free Times Radio app, and via your smart speaker. Matt Chorley on Times Radio.
I'm not a potato.
That is the Scottish Conservative MSP, Stephen Kerr, speaking in the Scottish Parliament yesterday, insisting that despite what the internet said, he is not a potato.
Baked potato changed my life.
The Scottish Parliament Twitter account, for some reason, declared that he was a potato high in vitamin C or something. Anyway, that's why we're talking politicians as vegetables. You've been texting in loads, so let's see how many we can get through. Rob says John Helix. It's nice because it's very niche. A different John says Christopher Artichoke and Steve Baker Beans. Very nice. Joe says Robert Potato Peel. Very nice. Also, I think Joe was the one who sent in Shami Chakrabarti Choke, which is particularly good. Lindsay says Michael Fabricantelope. Yes, it's a fruit, but he's a veg. Gary says Colliver Dowden. Broccoli Anderson. These are all really good. Connor says Deputy First Minister of Scotland John Sweedy. Adam says Dominic Kohlrabi. Someone else on Twitter says Jeremy Corbanana. Jeremy Corbanana. Banana is a fruit anyway. This is very good. Robbie says Mark Dauphinoise. That's very nice. Tom says Chickarori Stewart. Cress Phillips, we'll take that. Jack Strawberry, says Paul. Gareth says Borridge Johnson. It's really good. We're really enjoying all of these. Another Boris Johnson from Louise in Hull. Simon Artichoke from Sam on the email. Keir Stamato, that was someone else. Deirdre Broccoli. Diane Carrots. Helmut Kohlrabi, all really good. Maria Cauliflower. Ian Parsley. Yeah, very good. Very good. I think the winner today, I'm going to say, is Joe with Shami Chakrabarti Choke, just because it's really good. And we'll do something similar on the show tomorrow, I'm sure. Now, we've talked a lot about space on the show, and in particular, we've been counting down the days to when this rocket finally takes off from Cornwall. A few months ago, we spoke to people involved in the project, including Melissa Thorpe, who's the head of Space Cornwall. She gave us a bit of background on the project.
So the Virgin Orbit Launch 1 rocket is about 70 feet long, and it carries about up to 300 kilograms of satellite into space. So on our first launch we'll actually have several shoebox-sized satellites from several different companies all over the world that will come to be launched in Cornwall. So they'll arrive, many of them on lorries, which is exciting for the first time, because at the minute, all our satellites here in the UK have to be shipped overseas to launch. And so this is a great example with Josh's team, that it can get on a lorry and come down to Cornwall instead of, fly all over the world. And we'll be able to integrate it on site here in Cornwall into that rocket, ready to go to space. Will all happen in-house here in Cornwall.
So that was Minister from Spaceport Cornwall. Well, Kaya Burge has been down and had a look. He's the Times' science reporter. He's been looking at the Virgin Orbit launch area. Kaya, what's it like?
It's really fascinating. It's a kind of a vast kind of hangar-sized space on the edge of Newquay Airport, which doesn't even get very much in the way of, large jumbo jet aircraft usually. But they're sitting outside of this colossal jumbo jet with a giant rocket strapped under one wing. They've stripped all the seats out, and on the upper deck, they've got these two sort of mission control terminals where the sort of mission controllers will sit. In the hangar, they've got a clean room, people in full gear and hairnets and masks and shoe coverings, actually installing all of these small satellites into the spring-loaded compartments that will eventually, once they get up into orbit, deploy all these satellites out into space. You've got RAF pilots who's going to be actually flying the plane, wandering about doing checks. It's all quite an unusual thing to see in the Cornish countryside.
Do you feel like you're at sort of, I don't know if you've ever been the Kennedy Space Centre, the heart of NASA, or do you feel like you're just at an airport?
You do feel like you're at an airport, and it's kind of one of the things that's quite amazing about it, in that Virgin Orbit has got basically, it's like a mobile launch facility. I was there about a month ago when the plane actually landed, and there was the hangar, but they actually have brought with them the rocket, the plane, the kind of mobile mission control, and it's all being set up. When the launch happens, which should be in the next few weeks, they're just waiting for the sort of final license. The launch will happen, and if it's all successful, they'll pack all that stuff back up and sort of go back to California, and you won't sort of see all of that apparatus there anymore. And it's the idea that launching satellites into space can be done much more cheaply and much more easily now, rather than needing an entire, Cape Kennedy to be set up.
And one of the things that, when we've spoken to the people involved in it before, is this isn't just like a thing which is happening in Cornwall. There's a whole load of British scientists, engineers, experts who are involved in all this. Is creating jobs and businesses which are springing up as part of the sort of domestic space industry.
It is. I mean, one thing that people don't often know about, because when you think about space exploration and so on, obviously you think about the Americans and the Russians and think back to the 60s and the race to the moon and all that. But actually, outside of California, more satellites are made in Britain than anywhere else in the world. We make huge numbers of satellites, particularly smaller ones, rather than great big giant things that need to be launched from the equator somewhere, small things that can go into orbit. But we can't launch them in Britain. So if a satellite gets built in Britain, it has to be sent abroad to be tested. And then British engineers have got to sort of book a slot on a mission that happens to be launched by the Russians. Obviously, we're not doing that anymore. The Americans. Having our own capability is going to be a really big deal. And there are more spaceports planned, including for some actual rocket launches rather than rockets that are strapped to the wing of a plane. So Shetland is probably next in line to get a license when they'll be able to do actual proper, what they call it, vertical rocket launches. And it just means that now we'll have the complete sort of ecosystem in Britain, that satellites could be designed, tested and launched from UK soil.
Well, it's a great story, and I'm very jealous that you got to go down there. But it's really good to speak to Kaya Burge there, Times' science reporter, and you can read his report from being down in Cornwall last year. Basically, the biggest problem with Cornwall is the weather and the impact that would have. It's a great read. Go online right now. You know what to do. Go to thetimes.co.uk. If you haven't already, get yourself a subscription. You obviously get the access to all the news, commentary, analysis from all the Times journalists. You get the app and the website and the emails and the puzzles and all that. Just go to thetimes.co.uk and subscribe right now. Right then, coming up on the show tomorrow, let me just tell you, we're going to be talking about the man who invented the swingometer. I mean, it's been such a staple over the years of general election nights for decades. Well, sadly this morning we got the news that Sir David Butler, and he literally almost invented the idea of psephology, has sadly died. So on the show tomorrow, We're going to take a look at the life of Sir David Butler and his. I think he first worked on the 1945 Times Guide to the Commons. And he's been involved in election nights for years since. We're going to take a look. We're going to hear, I think, Peter Snow and Jeremy Vine are going to be on the show. Michael Crick's going to be on the show because we're great. So that's our big thing on the show tomorrow. The man who invented the swingometer. Which is going to be a great listen. We'll do Think Tank Thursdays as well. Do get in touch with your suggestions of policies at Think Tank Thursdays that Polly and Rachel can take a look at. You can email me, matt@times.radio. Right then, now we hurtle towards the end of the show. We've just got time for this. Yes, it's time for our hugely popular quiz. Can you get to number 10? 10 questions loosely connected to 10 cabinet jobs. The more questions you get right, the better job you get. Take your place alongside our listeners and guests and getting your hands on a certificate. And if you make it all the way to number 10 and get that right, you'll cross the threshold to become our show's Prime Minister. This is how the cabinet currently looks. Adele and Caleb, the members of the Youth Parliament, are Minister without portfolio. John Rentoul from The Independent is Culture Secretary. John, the accountant from Guernsey, is Environment Secretary. Ken, the sales consultant from Falkirk, is Transport Secretary. Sean Cullum is Education Secretary. Is he? I think somebody else might have got that. Anyway, Holly, Kelly and Natalie, who from Make Me Prime Minister, are Health Secretary. Times Radio presenter Darryl Morris is Home Secretary. Foreign Secretary is David Austin from Brighton. Jane Garvey and Fee Glover are the Chancellor. And my wife is still the Prime Minister. So, who is today's backbencher looking for promotion? Who is on the line, please? Hello.
Hi, it's Melvin.
Hello, Melvin. Where are you calling from, Melvin?
I'm calling from Stafford.
And what do you do in Stafford, Melvin?
I'm a painter and decorator.
A painter and decorator. Are you a posh painter and decorator?
Oh, you could say that, yes.
What's the poshest place you've ever painted?
Or
decorated?
Probably where I am now. I'm just at the Star Pub in Penkridge, just outside of Stafford, and I'm painting the flats just above it.
Very nice, very nice. Anything ever go wrong when you're decorating, Melvin?
Yes. I did have a lady once who left me all the paint to paint all the rooms in the house, all different colours. She went out to work, and I painted one of the rooms for the wrong colour, noticed halfway through, just managed to repaint it before she came home.
Well done. So it went wrong, but you sorted itself out. You didn't get into trouble.
I sorted that. I didn't get into trouble. She doesn't know to this day.
And
she might do now, though.
You've never, when you've been prepping for decorating, you've never, I don't know, tried to remove a large chandelier and let go of the wrong one?
No, I've never done anything like that.
Very good. We like that. Melvin, which cabinet job have you got your eye on?
Well, Minister without portfolio is vacant at the moment.
It is vacant at the moment, yes, in real life.
I've never got further than Chancellor, so your wife is pretty safe at the moment.
So have you been on the quiz before, Melvin?
No, I haven't. No.
Oh, right, fine. In terms of getting the questions right. In terms of getting the questions, well.
In terms of getting the questions right, yeah.
Let's see how we get on then, Melvin. Let's play. Can you get to number 10? Here we go. Question number 1. To become Minister without portfolio, complete this well-known phrase: a friend in need is a friend.
Indeed.
Is the correct answer. Question number 2 for digital culture, media and sport. Which juice is used to make a Bloody Mary? I don't know what that's got to do with... Anyway, what juice do you put in a Bloody Mary?
Tomato juice?
Was that a guess, Melvin?
That was a guess.
Well, it was a correct answer. It's a correct answer. Yes. Question number 3 from Environment, Food and Rural Affairs. Which fictional bear races sticks down a stream under a bridge?
Paddington.
No.
You were so confident, Melvin.
I was.
Do you know what it is now?
No.
Winnie the Pooh.
Oh, of course.
Pooh sticks.
Pooh sticks, that's right. Oh, never mind.
Well, you've made it to... Have yourself a Bloody Mary. If you're in the pub...
I'll go and have one.
Go and celebrate with a Bloody Mary. Yeah, after you finish painting. Otherwise, that might be a bit wobbly. So you've knocked out John Rentoul, Chief Political Commentator at The Independent. So you are now the Culture Secretary. Such high hopes, Melvin. I feel like you've let me down, you've let yourself down.